Welcome to Tiny World. I think we started this show to help everyone work remotely, and today we have Ryan, who needs no introduction, and Nick, who also needs no introduction. But I think both of them are some of my favorite people, and I think community is something which is something which every company should have today because that has sort of come up as one of the ways to engage with your customers. So we'll have this casual conversation around Ryan's journey, which I'm very curious about. Because I keep thinking about building community at Pesto, etc. And I think we will get going and see where it goes. I have posted an agenda in the chat, so if you guys are curious, you can look up the chat and see what all things we're going to talk about, but largely we'll keep it free flowing. So Ryan, welcome, thank you so much for taking our time, excited to have you. And
Yeah.
I think to kick this off, I would love to get back into your journey. Ryan in 2014. Everybody keeps telling me, like Ryan in 2014 is something you got to pull off, right? So, would love
Mm.
to. I was just coming out of my diapers around that time, so.
You're not that young.
no, no, I'm just kidding.
Making me
But
feel
would,
old though.
yeah, but would love to understand what was happening around that time. What did you exactly do? You were new to the valley, is what I've heard. But what was exactly happening, and how did you end up, having all of these people from the valley ecosystem and build a community while you were in YC and all of those things were happening?
Yeah, so I actually moved to San Francisco. I grew up in Oregon, went to school in Oregon. So I was there most of my,
Nice.
first, I guess, two-thirds of my life. I'm 34 now. And I moved to San Francisco in 2010 to join a company in the mobile video game space. So it was right when mobile gaming was skyrocketing and blowing up. Everyone from Facebook gaming was moving over to mobile. And it was super exciting. And so I worked in product for about 3.5 years there. And meanwhile, first 2 years in San Francisco, I don't, from memory, I didn't do a lot when it comes to like connecting with other people. I was just very focused on my work. And um, over that couple 2 years or so, started doing more writing and blogging. And I found writing is a really good vehicle for learning and for
Hmm.
just expressing ideas. I think when you can write about something, you can more clearly articulate and understand something. And so I found it just a way to like learn about products. So I wrote about all kinds of things from trying to understand why Snapchat works or why Tinder works. Like, what are the nuances or subtle
Hmm.
details of the product design? And we did a few different. By we, me and like Nathan Bashaw actually one time did this side project called Startup Edition, which is all about bringing founders together to write about different experiences or stories or learnings around the same topic. So like how you hired your first people or how you raised your first funding, those types of things.
Hmm.
And we did these founder brunches. So there's like an element of community building, pre-product hunt that I was participating in, and love Twitter. Twitter actually is probably, frankly, made product hunt made my career, and I think for a lot of people has changed many people's
Nice.
lives
Yeah.
because Twitter, even though I was in San Francisco, Twitter is where I connected with so many people who then became real life, like in person friends, and through all of that, writing, tweeting, connecting with other people, doing these brunches, doing these side projects, it allowed me to meet a lot of people and build some relationships, enough of an audience perhaps to launch something. So when product hunt launched, there were at least a few hundred people who signed up instantly because they had been following my writing or following me, and so it made it much easier to get started. And then of course there's a whole product hunt story, but that's 2013 is when product hunt started, the newsletter, and then the website came around that time as well, and then into 2014 is when it really took off.
Wow, so it was really building up the distribution first and like having an audience, which kind of like acted as a base. I hear like there are so many people who are announcing their fundraise. I think Packy is the new, TechCrunch, which is so awesome to see, on Not Boring. And
I
when
made that
did
same. What's funny is I made that same comment this morning. I think you and I maybe made a similar observation because I think he announced on decks,
mm,
not announced, but he wrote about on deck earlier today, and of course Main Street he wrote about as well. We got Nick from Main Street now.
Oh
on the
yeah.
deck.
Oh, when did Nick join Product Hunt? And just to give Nick's introduction, I think I have a nice way. Nick is the guy who owns like a few acres of forest where he's living right now. What's happening there, Nick?
Hey, it's usually forest, but it's just rocks right now. I'm in Woodbury, Connecticut, which if nobody's ever heard of it, that's kind of the point. It's about 90 minutes north of Manhattan. It's in Litchfield County. There's really not much we're known for, other than the fact that it's the antiquing capital of Connecticut. So if you want antiquing and to be in the middle of nowhere and to be able to afford a house instead of a little tiny San Francisco apartment, this is the place to be.
Nice, sick. Yeah. So I met Nick a couple of years back also, and I think it was majorly community-driven meetup. I think people introduced me, but going back to your writing, Ryan. I think writing to create a distribution channel, and then you just like kept. I think I heard in one of your interviews where you just kept engaging with people on Twitter all the time, and that really enabled you to build a community and then launch the product. Do you think like this launch of product is largely going to be driven by newsletters now? We have this, insane number of Substack writers now. I also started writing in Substack because, it gave me a lot of clarity of thought and
Mhm.
just helped me get like a way to express my curiosity.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm a big fan of writing. I frankly should get more into it. I've kind of shifted some of my priorities into other things now. But I mean, when it comes to launching and distribution, I think we're always Twitter, product hunt, writing, press, Clubhouse. Like there's so many different channels for people to get the message out. And I think in some ways it's fragmented. It used to be primarily driven through the press because we didn't have social media, or if you did, most people didn't have a
Mhm,
big enough audience for it to really reach a lot of people. And this is actually where we kind of stumbled upon this insight at Product Hunt is historically you build a product and you hope to have the press write about it. That's how you get outside your
mhm,
network. And of course, most people don't have press connection. We kind of stumbled upon this insight at Product Hunt is historically you build a product and you hope to have the press write about it. That's how you get outside your
mhm,
network. And of course, most people don't have press connections. The press, their job is not to write about you. Their job is not to market your product. So there's actually a misalignment there in incentives. And so what we kind of realized with Product Hunt is it's really a much more efficient channel for companies and founders to launch their product to the world. And that was sort of in hindsight or an insight that we sort of stumbled across, to be quite honest. But yeah, when it comes to launching, I don't know. Launching is such a weird word because people kind of
mhm,
imply that it's like, oh, it's a thing you do once and it's got to be big and you do it. It people maybe they don't think through like the purpose of a launch and the
mhm,
fact that also launching isn't just like a one time thing. You're always launching new things. Um, the way I think about it is like, what's the goal of a launch? And it doesn't always have to be user acquisition. In some cases,
mhm,
it's that's actually not the primary motivation or the primary goal.
mhm,
Sometimes it's getting more social credibility, like being out there and like having a statement in the world by launching is actually a way not to acquire users, but to like have something where people now at least know of your brand and have some sort of perspective on like where you stand. And furthermore, it also allows people to like when they Google you, maybe they see the product page, maybe they see a press article.
mhm.
It creates more like artifacts on the internet for people to learn about you. Um, but there's other things. It could be for recruiting. It could be for fundraising. There's so many different reasons why people launch.
Got it. Yeah, and I feel like one of the things which I've seen some companies do it well. Would love to, jump in and talk about that. I think there are companies like Pitch which are using different Slack, spaces and creating engagement with their customers, and a few early customers are like giving feedback constantly on Slack, which is helping them evolve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was curious about how do you think you did early on, and what would be like if you have to talk about like a playbook which can help companies establish a community which is not just there. I think the biggest problem is you have Slack and then you have 10,000 spaces and then
Mm-hmm.
like every company has a Slack space, right? But then most of them are just lying dead. So how do you build a great sort of place where customers can engage and really have like a faster feedback loop with them? Have you
Mm-hmm.
seen any good examples of it?
Well, I guess first, like defining what a community is helpful because some people, I think it's just helpful. First, I don't think every company needs a community. In
Hmm.
that, like, you can run a fantastic business without building a community.
Mhm.
But a lot of companies could benefit from it that might not seem like companies that would normally be community driven. Like a lot of B2B companies can actually be can benefit tremendously from community, even though it might not be obvious. So in some respect, I think the way to think about community is like there's some sort of like common belief or value system or connection among these people. And for a community to exist, one of the biggest differentiators between audience and community is an audience is like you're speaking to people. It's like a broadcast kind of mechanism. But in a community, you have people talking to each other. And so instead of one to many, it's many to many. And the beauty of that is that you can go on vacation and it still works. Like people still talk to each other and engage. And the other beauty is that people can cover a lot more ground. So in many communities, it creates UGC. So they take a forum, for example. Forums create content, which then creates far more content than I could ever produce myself, for example, not only due to my lack of time or limited time, but also my limited expertise. So you have this community who is like essentially helping each other or, collaborating in some way or another. And so to get to kind of your question, I mean, I think part of what's useful is actually starting with an audience first, because that's actually easier to start
Mhm.
with. Not that you have to necessarily, but if you have at least an audience to begin with, it's easier to then convert that audience into a community. And I think one really good example is what Lenny's done with his newsletter. So he started off initially with his newsletter on Substack
Mhm.
and writing about product and growth and those types of things. And then over time, he built a Slack community. And I don't know the full backstory on exactly how that kind of evolved, but ultimately that Slack community became something for his paid subscribers to be a part of and join. And now it's this community where they're interacting with each other and helping kind of a byproduct, like an exhaust of that community is content, material, and support for his newsletter as well for the audience growth mechanism. So I love that concept because it's such a simple one that people can wrap their head around. And it's also, Lenny's one person. Like you don't need a big
Mhm.
team to build a community too. Oftentimes it's really led by one person and maybe there are other people supporting, but communities are designed for scale. And that's also what just makes them so powerful from a business perspective.
Got it. Love that. And also, I love the way you define like it's minimum remaining, which means that in order to scale that, you need more participation from people rather than more people to manage it, which just makes it more beautiful. Nick, I was just curious, like, what's your experience been? I think Nick is like, I'm just giving away more money,
I
bailing
mean,
out of my community.
it's funny is like you're asking me questions about community. I learned all the community stuff I ever did from Ryan and Neve, Neve ran marketing and product hunt was my old boss, and Ryan's the one that hired me. So asking me what I think about community is you already got the master sitting here. Don't ask me.
Well, you could speak to. I don't want to put you in the spot, but you could speak to maybe the social side of community too, because you did an excellent job on like building and extending like kind of the product and voice through social. So that's another thing is community doesn't have to be in your own real
Mhm.
estate, like your own website. It's often extending to many different channels as
I
well.
mean the one thing that people for like the only thing we do with Main Street Social right now, and part of it's for lack of time, right? Good social
Mhm.
takes a lot of time, but part of it, frankly, is like there's a really lovely and we did this with the Shrug Social all the time too. The socks, the calendars, like
Oh yeah.
any the cycle, the loop is have one person tweet something. Doesn't matter what it is. The thing. Hey, I'm a Main Street customer. Hey, I got some socks from Neve. Hey, I hunted my first thing on Product Hunt. Look, I just got $100 in customers. Like something good, right? Whatever positive, it can be anything. Retweet it, and if people think that being retweeted by your account is important, special, interesting, feel goody in whatever way, they will
Mhm.
want to be retweeted too. And that can be because you have a huge audience, which we had from the Products and account, which made it really easy. That can be
Mhm.
because it's influential in some other way, like these really interesting people follow the account. It can be because it's memeable or iconic, or you add some flavor to the tweet, like we did with Shrug. But whatever it is, people want to get retweeted. I'm like, okay, well, in order to get retweeted by that account, I have to go do the thing that they're retweeting. Okay, that's easy. I can take a picture of the socks that I also got sent for free that are perfectly photographable because we sent them in little photographable
Mhm.
bags. Cool. And that cycle just works. I mean, people want it's not I don't know, I tweet I don't know. All of us have put up tweets or posts that just have like 3 likes and it's like your girlfriend, your friend from high school, and like one random person you've never met. You're like, Yippee, that was great. No, it's a lot more fun to have it gets retweeted and retweeted again, retweeted again, has 100 likes. Like, that's huge for most people. It's huge for me. I have 12,000 followers at this point. Like, 100 likes is still good for me. I still feel good about that. So whatever you can do to give people the positive like bump of, hey, you did a good thing, we're going to reward you for that. And you don't have to, if you explicitly say, if you tweet about it, we will, if you tweet about the socks we sent you, we'll retweet you. Like, no, they don't want to know that it's a quid pro quo. Like, I'm slipping you $5 under the table to do something. It's. I'm genuinely excited to tweet this, and I wouldn't want to tweet it even if you didn't bump it up. But hey, it's a positive, extra spin. Rally does this really well with all the swag that they send people. I mean, like, I'm wearing a Rally sweatshirt right now. Why? Because Rob and Fitz keep sending me shirts, and every time they send me a shirt, they think about it. So I'm going to keep tweeting about it because I like free shirts, and I've got all my Rally stuff behind me, and they do a lovely job of this. And it doesn't, I don't know, there's about as close to a playbook as I can find on community on social. It's funny is I left and we handed the reins to Amrith, and I noticed you started doing a lot of like, hey, what's the one thing you're struggling with right now questions, and we never did those when I was there. That was a new thing after I left, and I initially saw it and I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? Like, why are we trusting this like random kid who's been like applying to every job that was ever open for like 3 years? We finally gave him a shot, and then you know what? They started working, and it surprised me. And now it makes sense. Nice. People respond, and the responses get more traction because people will see their responses in addition to the original tweet, and that drives more engagement. And then the people that ask questions get answers, and I thought that was really cool. I don't know if they're still doing them as much anymore, but there was like a 6-month window where like, once a day it was like, what's the biggest thing you're struggling with? Or some of the like prominent founders do the like, what are you raising for and how much? I liked those. They might be violations of SEC security like fundraising law, but like we're just going to gloss over that and just say like positive community engagement as long as you're not breaking the law. And I don't think they are, or at least like probably not in a big enough way that anybody cares to enforce it.
What we do, this is conversation. Twitter optimizes for conversation, and I don't know like how they've adjusted some of their algorithms, but like they've been very explicit. Like their goal is conversation on Twitter for a while now. And what we found actually is when you give people a relevant and easy to answer question, people respond. Like we get hundreds of responses sometimes on Product Hunt for very simple questions or things that
really helps, right? With respect to this whole community thing, I love the thing which Shrug did. It was so awesome. Like, it was almost like, I want to raise funds from Shrug because you get cool socks. It's crazy, right? And masks. I actually found this Eva bot, I just posted in chat. I think I was trying to figure out how do you work like Shrug at scale, right? How do you get, send gifts to many people in an automated manner? And I found this bot. Apparently the founder was somebody who was trying to give gifts to a lot of people, and he tried to build like an scalable way, which today became like a thing for corporate gifting, which kind of like is not so cool, but also like when you send a bot to people where they can, given all their preferences, it asks like, do you have a dog or not, or a kid or not, etc., etc., and then like automatically generates a gift based on your preference, and it's done. But it's awesome. I think another thing which I learned from Facebook's recruitment team was that there was a lot of time they spent in trying to convince their engineers to interview more people, to take tech interviews, but it was really hard. No amount of money for interviews which they tried to give as reward worked. But then they started sending people shirts, like if you do 5 interviews, we'll send you this cool shirt, cool glasses, cool socks, etc. And that really solved the problem, right? So it's quite interesting, I think people like the gesture sort of community today. Where do we start? Which platform to use? Should we just like, go berserk on Twitter and focus on that? Or is there a platform where you feel like you can, create many-to-many engagement? I think there's one which I came across called circle.so, which was pretty interesting. But I was just curious, what's your view on it?
Yeah, my feeling is, oh, go ahead, Nick.
No, I'm trying to find one because I met with the founder like 3. Give me a minute. I'm gonna find it. There was a website. Give me a couple minutes.
Okay, sure.
I think my My feeling, well, it's such a contextual question. It's like, who are you building for, or what kind of community do you want to build? Because if you're, that really defines like what platform you should be using. Ultimately, trying to think of a good example. Like if you're building something for the beauty industry, Twitter is probably
Hmm.
not the most ideal kind of network. Twitter is for like Infowars, for people who love text, primarily information and real time news and updates and those sorts of things. But like Instagram is a platform where it's visual. So in some ways, it's like, where are those people hanging out already, and what's the right medium to communicate and engage with that community? When it comes to like bringing your own community in house, so there's like using social networks to like build that audience, and then there's with product, and let's say we have social like Twitter accounts and whatnot, but we also have a website. Um, that also kind of like varies. I mean, depending on the use case. I think Circle.so is one kind of newer platform for that. There's I'm forgetting the name of it, but the Dev2's team is building like a forum, kind of modern day forum software.
Hmm.
There's of course Discord is massive.
Yeah.
Discord is actually quite interesting in how quickly it expanded beyond gaming.
Hmm.
Um, but they all have their pros and cons. So I don't know. It's a very contextual question. It's kind of hard to answer.
Gotcha. Just out of the blue, by the way, I loved hanging out, like playing Among Us with random product hunt folks. I think
Oh
I
yeah,
did that during lockdown. Yeah, it was pretty dope. But I think Discord has been great.
3 billion, I think.
Yeah.
They
Um,
went public and they got reacquired. It was messy. It was in the dozens of billions for at least.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So no, it's hard to say like if it's cheap or not, but it seems from everybody that I've talked to, people who are far more experienced in the world of venture,
Hmm.
everyone's like, "Wow, that's a great deal." So, but who knows? It's hard to say.
Gotcha. Nick, did you find the platform?
Yeah, it's called Comsor, Commsor. Ryan, I think our mutual friend Andreas is an investor. Is how I think I found about it.
Hmm.
It's
Nice.
cool. It's they're a Main Street customer. That's how found them. I pulled up our ops tool and started looking for it. It's cool. I mean, there's a lot of these products that are promising to solve the problem. We haven't tried Comsor. I would love to. The material risk in trying one of these new platforms is that it disappears in 2 years, and so what happens to the community
Yeah.
that built on it? It's a lot easier to spin up a Slack channel because everybody's already in a Slack. So like, oh, I can just add another one. That's easy. Same thing with emails or text. Like all the community members. Oh, I already look at my text messages all day. Oh, great. I don't. There's no like material risk in text messages disappearing. Phone numbers are always going to be valuable, but they're worth trying, right? You might find that Comsor or the Dev2 one or Circle, like, hey, our community actually really loves this one for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Great, run with that. Like, no, like
Yeah.
that's. I'm thinking about 3 years down the line when something could potentially bad happen, but
Yeah.
it's a good product and your community loves it. Chances are others will too. So it's very likely they'll be able to raise more money in this ecosystem.
That's right. I think I was having a chat with my roommates, and we were just chatting about that, how humans have this limitation of maintaining 150 relationships at any given point of time, and that, like, it's such a bummer because especially if you're a founder, you would screw up so many times and go through such hard time like all the time, and you end up building some amazing, meaningful relationships. I think I reconnected with so many people during the lockdown, right? So we were just trying to sort of think of how do you, without making it the many to many relationships which Ryan talked about earlier, that is easier to make or easier to happen. And I think, yeah, Slack is one which is working for sure. But I was just curious how other people are doing it, to engage more. Cool.
In more from like me personally connecting and maintaining those relationships.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't use anything, and I don't. I have no interest in using any software for that. To be honest, there's so many
exactly.
companies that are like CRMs to like remind you to like text your friend that you haven't talked to. The reality is, if I haven't talked to my friend in a while, who cares? Like maybe we've drifted apart. Like it's. I also don't keep to do lists. I'm weird like that. I'm like, if it's important enough, it will come up. So
Yeah,
I also feel like some of those platforms are a little bit artificial, and I have nothing against anyone using them, but
yeah,
I don't know. It feels like if you need software to like remind you to say hi to somebody, maybe your relationship just isn't that close, and that's fine. Like
yeah.
I have very few like really, really deep, close relationships, and I'm totally cool with that. And then I have a lot of loose connections and friends, and they come and go in my life. So anyway, um, sorry, I went on a little rant just because I've seen so many people say like, this is a problem, right? We should solve it and build a startup around
Exactly.
it. Like, I don't think it's a real problem. Now, what is a problem isn't the relationship management side, in my opinion, but it's just simply a directory. I just want a directory is all of like everybody that I know, their contact info and metadata about them, like where they work, what they do, what their interests are.
Hmm.
Um, that is actually a huge problem that I would love to have solved. That LinkedIn and no CRM really has solved to date.
I'm
Gotcha.
laughing. That's what associates are for at big funds. Like I'm laughing because I remember being like the
Yeah.
emergent capital CRM, and you're like, oh, this is where all that data goes. Got it. And they have like 4 people managing it. Like, it was
It's tough. Yeah.
it's
Oh my
impossible.
god.
It's
Yeah.
impossible. No one wants to do it, and it's the worst job at the fund is managing the CRM. Like my God, ugh, I wouldn't want to do that.
Exactly. Like right on the day quarter ends, every quarter, that it's like something artificial. So that makes so much sense, and I feel like, especially if we think about it, when it comes to forming many-to-many relationships, if one person can do 150, I think that shouldn't be a bottleneck. I think the platforms, rather, the bottleneck might be how can we enable more people to engage with people within that platform, right? So uh,
Mhm.
and I think we can. I just have one more question, and then we can go back to the audience. I think there are some great questions coming in from people. But the last one was like, I think there's some really impressive work happening with On Deck. So I'd love to give them a shout out. They just announced a massive raise, and I've been an On Deck fellow, and I've loved the way they, conduct their cohorts, etc. Just wanted your, sort of view. What do you think about what they're building? Because I think the biggest thing which universities, especially business school, the biggest value they add is, or one of the biggest value they add is network and learning, which comes along, and both of that you get at On Deck in fraction of a price. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what's happening there? Do you think this is something which will scale across many domains?
I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan because the education. I went to school at U of O, and actually, I don't really care if I say bad things about them. They're not bad, but it's very, very inefficient. And this is just an anecdote. It's one experience, but I know a lot of others maybe aren't the most satisfied with their like educational experience in college. It's extremely expensive. The things that go into college is part of it is education, and yes, part of it's community and network and like a bunch of other things. But fundamentally, like, you can learn anything online right now. But what's missing still is community, and how do you do that, especially online at scale? And I think what OnDeck has done is really compelling. And the way they've
Mhm.
described themselves, I know, is like the Stanford for the
Mhm.
internet is kind of one way of putting it. And you've seen them expand from, first focusing on founders and do so in modern day like actionable skills or subjects.
Mhm.
Whereas when I went to school, they were teaching me how to write a 20-page business plan to start a company, which is the
Mhm.
opposite of what you should be teaching entrepreneurs. It's actually offensive at this point, frankly. I hope that they've learned since then, but it's offensive because they taught the wrong things. And um, so I'm a big fan of education and new approaches to it. And the thing about education, it's such a lever in that if you can educate people more efficiently and make it more accessible to people, like imagine the impact that has in the future. It's huge. It's massive. So big fan of what they're doing and what Eric's built over there and the rest of the team.
That's amazing. Also, I heard a flying rumor that when you say it's not bad, it's inefficient, it's bad. it's,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
awesome. Let's go to the audience. Would you like to pick any questions, or I can pick some for you? I think um, Laura is asking something interesting. Um, she says one community. I think we can bring Laurie up, right, David? Awesome. Okay, sure. Got it. Yeah. So while she comes up, I think we can start sort of taking some questions. I think there are some really interesting ones which I saw are coming up. I can just repeat what she was talking about. I think she's saying like Slack is impossible because I already use it for work, and have to pay attention to more notifications. Without them, I forget. So yeah, it's just a distraction and too much, maybe, right? So I guess like her question was more around like if Slack is the most efficient way because everybody's on Slack and it's also too much, how do you differentiate and sort of stand?
Actually, I'll share the interesting observation. So I'm a part of this private community of like founders, investors, and it started initially on WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is a single thread feed. We are all familiar with it. And then they basically recreated the same group effectively in Slack. So it's the same people, same content, same everything for the most part, but one is on Slack, one is on WhatsApp. And I rarely check the Slack group. And the reason for that is it's for some reason in my mind, I have like product hunt and weekend fund is Slack. And so it's sort of, that's where my mind space is when I go to Slack. But the more important observation is that threading is really bad for large scale communities. Threading on Slack is really difficult, or on Slack is extremely difficult because whenever you open up Slack to a team, you now know you not only have multiple channels to look through, but you have multiple threads to look through. And so there's this fatigue of actually checking. Whereas WhatsApp, I don't really care if I miss some things. At least I can just quickly scroll and kind of get to what everyone's talking about right now. Just like real-time text platforms, but even like whether it's Clubhouse or Twitter or Instagram or Reddit, like they all have these nuances that make a big difference in how you engage and connect people together.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And Nick, go ahead.
Ryan, did you see what happened this morning with Slack Connect? Have you tried it yet? It's surprisingly fun. So
I haven't tried it yet.
If nobody knows what I'm talking about, it was a phone. They can chat with you directly in Slack. So it merges. Wow. You have a team, and you have all your channels and all the rest. A year ago, they launched shared teams, so you could invite another company into your Slack. So I'll give you an example. Main Street is built on top of Finch, which is a third-party platform integrated with payroll services. So we have our Slack hooked up with Finch's Slack, and when there's a bug, which there always are, we just Slack them, and it can create. There's some bot that they use to create tickets out of our messages. So all of our communication with Finch lives directly in Slack. We use a marketing automation tool called Clay. They're lovely people. I love the product. It's amazing. Everybody should try it. Clay.run. I think it might still be in beta. I don't know if anybody can. Whatever. Point is, they're in our Slack. They helped us get set up, and they live in our Slack with a shared channel, and we can DM too. As of this morning, you can now send personalized, like one-on-one DM invites to anybody on Slack. So I added like my high school best friends, my college best friends, like people I DM. Because every day, I have my text messages open, and I have my Slack open, and I text message with my friends when I get bored during meetings, and I Slack with my colleagues when I need to. And now it's all in Slack, which Ryan's right. Like, we'll see if I still use it as much. A lot of this is like, not motivate. There's momentum to me using texts to talk with my friends. I don't know if that momentum is going to carry into Slack. But we'll see. It's cool, right? Like I was shockingly impressed with the rollout. They screwed up the rollout in the sense of like there's some harassing features that there's no block feature in it yet. It wasn't totally perfectly done, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So I'm on Team Slack. I like this. I'm giving it a shot.
That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty much sounds similar to what Telegram did with groups. Slack did it with people. It sounds pretty dope. Like have your personal friends as well in it. I'm gonna give it a shot as well. Cool. Let's go to the next.
It's brilliant. Yeah. Whether it works or not, strategically, it's brilliant. It's trying to eat into email.
Lori, who wants to do a follow up, I think would love to have that. Lori, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
It's like folklore, lore.
Gosh, Lori. Yeah, sorry about that. I guess that. Yeah. Cool.
Well, the one thing that I've found really interesting, and I thought this has been true in a number of different iterations of community products, that places like LinkedIn or Meetup, where they already have everyone on there with profiles and everything like that, aren't just turning into some kind of community platform that actually would be better. So I'm curious why you think that's not happening.
And do you mean specifically on LinkedIn, or you mean in general, building community on those other platforms?
Well, I think LinkedIn is always the most curious one to me because they do own people's profile in such a specific way that it seems like if they went into a space like this, they'd have a natural advantage. But also, I guess maybe I'm missing some of the downsides that people might perceive from doing it. So I'm curious if you've given any thought to, or other players that have, I guess Facebook has groups.
I can tell you that Main Street is probably actually LinkedIn's ideal customer. We spend a lot of money every week on LinkedIn ads, like a shocking amount. Like, wow, that's a lot of money going through one account every week. Their targeting data on running ad campaigns is unparalleled. And we've tried to recreate it. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but you have to, until, I don't know, we have 3 or 4 people at Main Street that all used to work at LinkedIn. Their customers are people like me that are going to spend $1 million a year on LinkedIn ads. And when you think about it, now they're part of Microsoft, so they have to think even bigger swings. I don't know how, if I was a product manager there, how you could get any momentum internally to hey, we need to reach.
But yeah, Ryan, if you have something to add on that, would love to have that.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is overlooked by. I don't actively use it all that much. It's just not something I am personally drawn to. But I'm also not like Nick, where I have a business need to use it and promote and sell. But I think it is very overlooked by a lot of people because it's not as cool. It's not cool like a lot of other platforms. It's also not where a lot of people spend. Well, a lot of people do spend a lot of time on it, but it's just less talked about. It's not in the news, maybe because it's been around for so long. It's all about business. But it is a really interesting platform because people go there with, I think, one frame too for whether it's community building or for average person. If you go to Facebook, you're probably not as much in a work mode as you are with LinkedIn, which is why it would make sense why Main Street would probably be dramatically more effective in LinkedIn versus Facebook. Even if probably the targeting, let's just assume the targeting is just as good. I bet a user on LinkedIn is probably going to convert much higher for something like Main Street, where it's a business related thing. So that kind of goes back to the topic of what's the context or culture of this
rule. And so you can run ads that are just all text, which no other platform lets you do because they're so engaging, right? And they pull your eye away from everything else in the feed because the text is 6 times as big as it.
So big, yeah.
Untouched, open fields. Hopefully, I don't know, other R&D tax credit providers don't watch this, but they did. I don't mind. They can see that we run ads. It's fine. Open field. It's been really fun. And their team loves us because we're willing to try campaign structures that most companies don't have the budget or the bandwidth to try. So we've had a lot of fun with it. Also, I didn't come up with any of the LinkedIn stuff. This is all Rohan. He's our paid acquisition. Say, look, we do LinkedIn ads, and he does all the stuff. I just show up and take credit.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. I'm gonna give it a shot as well. We'll hit you up. I think we have Nadia next. Sorry, Nadia, to keep you waiting, but please go ahead.
Hey, no, this is awesome. I want to drop back.
On Twitter, you have followers. That's a sign of status. On Product Hunt, a sign of status for a maker might be the number of upvotes they received, or product of the day, prestige, and more status. So I think status is just one of those kind of 4 levers to think about when kind of designing communities or social products. And it is one of the most powerful ones. Stuff is the one that I tend to recommend people avoid the most. Not that the socks that I've gotten from Shrug and everything aren't a good idea. I think they're a brilliant idea. But stuff is usually in the chat.
Thank you. I'm curious, one follow-up question there is, do you think this has shifted with sort of this remote digital trend versus how things used to be, or is it sort of continuing on the trajectory it was on?
In terms of status specifically?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. Well, I guess on one side, more of our life is online, and the way that we communicate, the way that we express ourselves, that's more online. So because it's online, it opens up different ways to illustrate status. So like clothing is how people illustrate status in the real world, is just one form. And technically I could be wearing some fancy shirt, but like maybe clothing and jewelry and those things actually are less impactful or effective, let's say, in portraying status. I don't know. It's interesting. I suppose the design of these products is potentially, because we're more online, the design of these products and the way that they imbue and or represent status is probably magnified in some capacity. But I haven't thought about that deeply. That's a really interesting question.
I'll call out one more thing too. I met half of my coworkers for the first time in person a couple months ago. I had no idea how tall any of them were, and it's silly. Mm-hmm. I met Josh from Kikier, who now works at Main Street, who I've known through Shrug when we invested in his company, and then at Main Street when he joined and still works here. I never met him in person. He could have been 5'1" or 6'10", and I would have known. But I know Ryan's 6'2". Ryan is taller than I am. I remember looking up at Ryan for coffee. Like, Ryan is tall. And that's a big level set. I think virtual backgrounds are awesome. Like, I am lucky enough to have a cool room and, like, a camera that I can afford that does the cool focus thing. Like, I expensed it. Not everybody has that. Great. Virtual backgrounds are awesome. I've never once been on a call and be like, can you turn off your virtual background so I can see what room you're in? Like, no one's ever on people's screens, but, like, no one cares, right? It doesn't matter. I really like that. That's a big thumbs up for me. You can't see what shoes I'm wearing. I'm not wearing shoes. I'm wearing socks. Like, it doesn't matter. A black T-shirt that's $5 looks the same as a $100 black T-shirt on Zoom. So you're I don't know. I remember when I moved to San Francisco and I thought I needed to dress up to work at Product Hunt, I went and bought like a bunch of shirts, thinking that like I needed to look presentable in the office. And I showed up the first day wearing like a fancy button down from Uniqlo and nice chinos, and everyone looked at me like I was insane. But hey, right? Like, I don't know, $400 on clothes. That's nothing compared to somebody who goes and works in investment banking as an intern and is required to wear a suit all day or a fancy blouse or dress or whatever. I don't know the names. So thumbs up. I'll take it. We're going to be remote forever. At least, I don't know. Main Street is. I don't know about everybody else, but works out better for us.
Gotcha. Please go ahead.
I was going to have a quick note. When I interviewed for a job in San Francisco at a video game company, I wore like a nice shirt and a tie, and my boss who like brought me in to like have me interview his team, he like laughed at me. He's like, "What are you wearing? This is a video game company, dude." So lesson learned.
Oh God, I think the first conference I went to was Rise in Hong Kong, and I went there with my suit, my tie and suit on, and that was one way of getting attention. But it was hilarious. I think we have all sort of been there. It's funny almost. Awesome. Ryan, just curious, do you have a hard stop or you can take a couple of more questions?
I only have a stop at 6, so like 8-ish minutes.
Got it.
Got it. Good.
Let's do one more. And I was curious, like, if there's a fun story from Product Hunt before the next question goes up, because I think one which I have a hitch for is Product Hunt.
Yeah. I pay attention to detail to a fault maybe sometimes. And so whenever like camel case versus like space versus all those things, I pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So I had a chat with Andreas and he was like, immediately he saw that picture, he was like, oh, this really turns Ryan on. So
off, you mean?
Yeah, it turns off, yeah. Sorry. That is so funny.
We've rejected candidates for social roles that will type in Main Street without the second S, or the first S capitalized. I'm like, oh, sorry, it's not gonna be a fit. If you can't spell the name of the company, like, I can't trust you with your Twitter account. It's silly, but like, it's on our website, it's on Twitter, like Product Hunt with the 2 words smushed together, instant X. Like, nope, I'm sorry, it's not gonna work.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's. I'm with Ryan on this one. You can be petty in this one specific tiny thing. Yeah, I'll get.
If it's for a role, like a content role or a social role, I think it's important.
Mhm.
If it's for an engineer, I really don't care. Like if they capitalize it correctly.
Gotcha. That's one job I won't have in that case.
I think
Disqualified.
yeah, I think you're good. You're good at where you're at now.
Awesome. I think we have another question. I think is it Mishti? Would love to. I think DK wanted to come up. DK, you wanna jump in?
I think Missy's got. Okay.
Hey, yeah, I mean, DK and I all talk about status a lot. I think on lunch break we end up talking, and one thing that's come up, especially with a lot of talk about sort of the metaverse and NFTs, is for any sort of status game to work, you need this collection of people who care about the same thing, who care about each other's opinion at least. And so I'm curious for you guys where you found that. Where is that online right now for you? Is it your Twitter mutuals or somewhere else, or is it like private messenger groups that are kind of on like the private layer of the internet that have come about because of offline interactions? And how do you see that evolve?
And it's probably healthier for everybody if you don't have as many as you used to, right? Like, who gets the corner office? Like, who got invited to lunch with blah, blah, blah. Like, just don't do that anymore. So I'm sure they'll emerge, but for the time being, I'm happy without them.
But we still have a corner office.
Everybody gets a corner office, right? I can go get an image of a. Yeah, I was talking about Nintendo and Pokemon and Super Plastic all day, but like, no one thinks that I'm a better worker for it. It's just
Well, I think actually like that. There's like the old school kind of golf clubs and corner office interpretation of that, but I also think that they're kind of omnipresent and also important when you think about the creator economy and self-expression. Because why do you express yourself? You think other people will care about what you're sharing, like in your link in bio tree or whatever. Like, why would you put an NFT there? That because you think other people will care about you having it there. So that's kind of more what I'm wondering about, like where those collections of like-minded people will start emerging.
Clubs, like I joined there's a club for people that like to invest in vintage sealed video games. We're like six of us in the room. I don't think the market's much bigger than the six of us. That was fun. And I ended up in a live chat with Rob from Rally and a couple guys who host a podcast about the space, and I was like, this is great. Twitter's been that for me. I can't
helping people assemble and like improve their game, improve their creativity, which ultimately like pushes humanity forward. So I think the old school, golf club membership style of status is more of a net negative and a drag on humanity. But I think the kind of dematerialized virtual world self-expression creativity style of status is actually a huge benefit. And I actually wish more of the world could see that type of status, because I think it's actually a healthy one. I think it actually pushes us all forward collectively. And you don't have to be just the one king. You can be king of the vintage shrink wrap video games, or was that the topic?
I'll take anything that lets me convince Kate that I can buy more of these instead of like a car. So I'll take any argument that helps.
Nice.
One quick comment. Who's in that club too? Metaphorically speaking, because that's actually more important than almost anything else sometimes. Because the product itself or the features or whatever, it could be a really awful experience. But if the people that you want to hang out with, people kind of say the cool kids, not in like a derogatory way, but like the people who you want to be around, if they're there, you'll be there too. Clubhouse did that very well for the tech industry, and then quickly the music industry.
So I think we also ran out of time, but thanks so much, Ryan, for just trying to be mindful of your time, because I think you'll get some time to water your fake plant in Briggs.
Yeah.
It's never gonna me.
Oh, God. Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to chat about AngelList Office Toilet, but I guess we'll keep it for next time.
I don't know. I don't go to the office anymore, so.
That's awesome. But thanks so much, guys, for coming on. And I think everyone who's listening, Mishti and David, has been managing the whole thing from the background. So really appreciate you taking the time and helping out. And we'll do this more often. And I'll reach out again, and it'll be fun again. It is fun hosting, and we'll share a bunch of tweet threads about
It's my first highlighter.
It's the
Very
first
Great
highlighter.
highlights
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Cool.
Exciting.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
See you
care.
later.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Eddie.
so much. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
coming in. Take care. Bye.
Maybe because you're the original host, Ayush, if you hit the little
Got it.
exit.
End
Okay.
event.